they had so many things, but it was just another form of servitude. All right, they had servants, the Indians had servants, an encomienda system, right? They called it. Now he says here says Ponce says should require of the caciques and Indians in said islands, in the best manner that they could be made to understand that was said to them, in conformity with a requisition which had been drawn up by many learned men, that they should come to the knowledge of our Catholic faith, to obey and serve as they are bound in it. And you shall have written down by 2 or 3 scriveners, if they obey, and before as many witnesses and trustworthy persons as shall be there, that it may serve as our justification. And if after the above procedure they seek not to obey the contents of said requisition, in such case you may make war upon them and enslave them. But if they obey, you shall treat them as best you can, and shall seek in every possible way that they be converted to our holy Catholic faith. And if after having once rendered obedience to said requisition, again in Spanish is called requerimiento. Now they're talking about, and I mentioned this in the other videos, that when the Spanish got there, Columbus and all of them, they had this kind of, they had this document, this legal document they read out. It was called their requerimiento, that they read out to the Indians in their language, right? So they would say, you have to accept, the Catholic Church, you have to accept Jesus and the kingdom and serve the queen and king, and you have to do it, or else we will enslave you and take all your land and your. So it was like a game they were playing with them, right? So they can say, oh, well, we told them at least if they chose war, or that, like it's saying here, right? So if they disobey, what happens is we should enslave them, right? That's what it says here, right? So this is the requisition or requerimiento. It's called in Spanish. Look it up. They shall rebel. I command that you shall again cause them to comply with the said requisition before making war upon them or doing them any harm or damage. I mean, so eventually Ponce was able to conquer the Caribs and, settle in this island, other islands around there in Florida. The whole area they were calling Florida. Even the islands, Bimini and Guadalupe and all, they were all that calling all Florida. It seems in a lot of these records. All right, so, a lot of the Spaniards were doing the same. So there's other accounts. It says here in February of the following year, 1517, Francisco Hernandez de Cordova sailed from Havana with 3 ships and 110 men. Among them were some noblemen who had come to Cuba but a few months before, and he preached the same mass for them and administered the sacrament. Diego Velazquez, at that time governor of Cuba, had sold the adventurers one of the ships on the condition that it should be paid for in slaves, which were to be secured by making war upon the Indians in the Lucayan Islands, all right, not Africans. These kind of, the Spaniards were enslaving or putting Indians into servitude, not African. All right, so I just wanted to show you some examples what they were doing. There's a lot of accounts of different Spaniards going on different voyages or expeditions of discovery, right? They were really basically looking for slaves. And gold and how to exploit whatever, whoever they found and whatever land or country they landed in America. All right, so now there is one dude that is very important to what I was saying earlier, how they teach us that the first so-called Negroes came in 1619. That was by the English, but that is so wrong. All right, this is a person you probably never heard of in your life. It's a Spaniard, one of those Spaniards. All right, his name was Lucas Vasquez de Leon. So Leon. All right, so it says here, there was living in Hispaniola a certain Lucas Vasquez de Leon of Toledo, who had come there with Ovando, from whom he received the appointment of alcalde mayor or mayor, right, mayor of La Concepcion and other towns. He had now become one of the auditors of the island, and he was said to be a man of considerable intelligence, well educated and virtuous, according to the standard of the times, though unlearned in the arts of war, never having done a corslet or borne a sword to earn his wages therewith, says Oviedo, who was personally acquainted with him. He was very rich, having received from Ovando 400 Indians in repartimientos in payment of his salary, as was that time the custom. All right, so what are they talking about? Repartimiento. So the Spaniards, when they took over, settlements, Indian settlements, and they put them and grouped them wherever they had their missions or whatever, then they will distribute them. So repartir in Spanish is to distribute. So repartimiento is like a distribution of the Indians. So he got 400. That's a lot. When I have, like in my country, this happened in 1569 in Costa Rica, where they put all the Indians in missions because we were living all spread out to the whole country. So they gathered us up and put us in different missions. Once they had us in the missions, they did the repartimientos. And I have a book with the list, the numbers they distributed to each Spaniard or colonist, right? And again, they call it repartimiento, and then it becomes an encomienda. So now you had an indentured servant, right? So this guy had, he got lucky. He got 400 Indians, right? That's a lot of servants, right? Stirred up, no doubt, by reports of kingdoms to be had for the mere asking. Leon associated himself with Diego Caballero, clerk of the Audiencia of the island, secured a license for his undertaking, and in 1520 dispatched a caravel from the port of La Plata, having Francisco Gordillo as captain and Alonso Fernandez Sotil as pilot, with directions to sail northward until the continent was reached. Now, let's remember, this is in, if you don't know, in Santo Domingo, which is in Hispaniola. This is where they're talking about, all right? So it so happened that shortly before the departure of Leon's caravel, Juan Ortiz de Matienzo, another auditor of the same island, had sent out a caravel under the command of Pedro de Quejos, in search of Caribs, all right? In search of what? Caribs to sell as slaves. Caribs to sell as slaves, all right? Not Africans. You see, they're putting all their time and effort, all their charters, everything they're being financed from their Spanish king and queen, right? So look what they're enslaving. Look where they're doing it. They're doing it here. What, again, they're in search of Caribs to sell as slaves in virtue of the general license of October 30, 1503. That's what I was just talking about. All right, so a license to basically enslave Carib Indians, right? Not Africans, Carib Indians. In this traffic, the auditor's name did not openly appear, having failed to secure the intended cargo. Quejos' caravel was returning home when, in the neighborhood of the island of Luca Yonique, it fell with Leon's vessel, which apparently had been cruising about for several months on errands of which no account remains. So these errands, I wonder what they were. Were they enslaving American Indians? Is that what these errands were? That is not, there's no account of. Here the two commanders exchanged advices, and Quejos finally decided to sail with Portillo for the mainland, intending, as it subsequently appeared, to fill his empty hold with slaves to go get Caribs, all right? So he joined up and to go to the mainland. They're talking about North America, the United States, like Florida and Louisiana, all these places, the mainland. To get what? To fill his empty hold with slaves, to get slaves. They ain't trying to colonize, they're going up there to get slaves. Sailing slowly northward for 8 or 9 days, or as some report, driven by stress of weather, in June of the year following Gordillo's departure in 1521, the two caravels came upon the continent in latitude 33 degrees 30, according to Quejos' testimony, at the mouth of a considerable river to which the name of St. John the Baptist was given, because of its discovery on the feast day of the saint. The Indians appear to have called the country Chicora, and it lay perhaps somewhere in the vicinity of Cape Fear. 20 men were sent ashore in the boats to secure the goodwill of the natives, the necessity of which Leon had impressed upon his commander while the ship sought to enter the river. We're at this website called the historynewsnetwork.org. It says from Columbia College in Arts of Sciences, the George Washington University, the forgotten first attempt to plant a colony on U.S. soil. And this is going to correlate with what we just actually read, the book. We're going to go back to it, but I just wanted to show you this. It says in June 1526, Lucas Vasquez de Leon, a wealthy Spanish official in the city of Santo Domingo, Hispaniola, founded a colony near the mouth of the Petey River in eastern South Carolina. This is what we're talking about. He just sent Gordillo, where he just came back from. 6 decades before Roanoke Island, 1587, 8 decades before Jamestown, 1607, and almost a century before the Mayflower landed at Plymouth Rock in 1620, a century, 100 years before, Leon began his North American dream. Leon's effort has been overlooked, perhaps because most people prefer to believe that the U.S. life began with the arrival of English-speaking Anglo-Saxons living under the British law. Perhaps its settlement is neglected because of its tragic fate, Death by mismanagement, disease, and slave revolt. Slave revolt. Perhaps it is unmentioned because of its unique rebirth in the woods by people not considered a worthy part of U.S. heritage. Leon prepared for his great adventure in 1520 by sending Captain Francisco Gordillo, that's what we just read about in the other book, to locate a good landing site and build friendly relations with the local inhabitants. The captain instead teamed up with a slave hunter, Pedro de Quejos. Do you hear this? That's the other guy in the book, right? Quejos, remember, had a license to enslave Carib Indians. It was a license he was given. It's not that he was just a slave hunter. He was given a license by the king. While failing to survey a site or build good relations with anyone, the two men captured 17 Native Americans. Captured who? 17 Native Americans, not Africans, and brought them back to Santo Domingo as slaves. The first European act on what is now U.S. soil was making slaves of free men and women. Again, the first European act on what is now U.S. soil, the first act ever by any European and American in the United States, all right, was making slaves of free men and women. The two adventurers returned to Leon with enchanting tales of naming a great river in the honor of St. John the Baptist. You see, that's the river we just heard about, and cutting Christian crosses and trees. Leon was not impressed with their seizure of 17 Native Americans and brought the issue to the attention of a commission presided over by Diego Columbus. The Indians were declared free and order returned, but Spanish records do not show whether the order was carried out, so we don't know if they were returned. We're going to get into the other book again. We're going to go back to the historic accounts, but they do not show that Leon, to make amends with the natives who lost their loved ones, sent back the slaver Quejos, who started the problem. Once again, Quejos returned with other captured natives. He this time volunteered to serve as guides for the Spain's expedition. But he sent them back, I guess, to get captured or something. I don't know why he sent them back. I guess he came back with more slaves, talking about they volunteered. Leon also retained one of the original 70, which he named Ferdinand Chicorana. He kept one of them as his New World interpreter. Impressed with his skills and knowledge of the mainland, he brought Chicorana to Spain to meet the king. After this meeting, King Ferdinand issued an order permitting Leon to sail for the coast of North America. The king's orders forbade enslavement of Indians and added, "You be very careful about the treatment of the Indians." 3 Dominican missionaries were sent to protect Native Americans from Europeans. With this record as backdrop, Leon prepared to launch his expedition to North America. After some delays, his fleet of 6 vessels sailed from Puerto de la Plata. Aboard were 500 Spanish men and women, 100 enslaved Africans. Wait a minute. What are we talking about? 1526, right? Wait. But you told us, right? This is from the George Washington University, Columbia Colleges of Arts and Sciences, right? What are they telling us here? I mean, we're going to read it in the other book, but we're going to see who they really were. If they were really Africans, right? But what are they telling us? That they brought 100 enslaved Africans. So I thought it was in 1619 that the first so-called enslaved Africans arrived in North America or United States. You see what I'm trying to show you, right? How it's all a lie. It's just like a movie. It's like a script they're giving you, right? They declared that the first so-called. They wanted that as a reference point, a starting point for some reason. But you can see that this expedition of Leon in 1526 to South Carolina brought with him 100 enslaved Negroes, which they're calling Africans here. I mean, these characters, these Spaniards we're talking about in the book we're reading right now, I don't see no accounts of them enslaving Africans anywhere, going or buying any Africans in their records.
It's too easy to report y'all, man. I make this shit too easy. I appreciate y'all. We're gonna see who really toxic.
All over their records, all these Spaniards are enslaving American Indians.